The day after the mysterious event in Brixton, the newspapers were filled with detailed accounts and analyses of the incident, now famously known as the Brixton Mystery. Each publication offered its own perspective, bringing new information to light. Among these accounts, the following summaries were notable. The Daily Telegraph pointed out the case's unusual elements, the victim's German heritage, the lack of clear motive, and a chilling message on the wall. These clues led to speculation of the crime being the handiwork of political radicals or revolutionists, possibly linked to socialist groups in America. The article ended with a call for tighter surveillance of foreigners in England. The Standard took a different angle, suggesting that such lawless acts tended to occur more frequently under liberal administrations, a result of societal unrest and weakened authority. The article detailed the victim, an American, who had been staying in Camberwell with his secretary, Mr. Joseph Stangerson. Their last sighting was at Euston Station, but the trail went cold until Mr. Drebber's body was discovered in a desolate house on Brixton Road. The fate of Stangerson was still shrouded in mystery. Scotland Yard detectives Lestrade and Gregson were reportedly working diligently on the case. Meanwhile, the Daily News emphasized the political angle of the crime, attributing it to the influx of refugees fleeing the oppressive regimes in Europe. These individuals, though potentially good citizens, carried with them a strict code of conduct, often enforced with lethal consequences. The paper stressed the importance of locating Stangerson and investigating the deceased's lifestyle. The discovery of his boarding address was seen as a critical breakthrough thanks to Mr. Gregson of Scotland Yard's efforts. Sherlock Holmes, upon reviewing these articles, appeared to be highly amused by the various theories and the ongoing police investigation.
I told you that whatever happened, Lestrade and Gregson would be sure to score.
That depends on how it turns out.
Oh, bless you, it doesn't matter in the least. If the man is caught, it will be on account of their exertions. If he escapes, it will be in spite of their exertions. It's heads I win and tails you lose. Whatever they do, they will have followers.
What on earth is this?
It's the Baker Street division of the Detective Police Force. In the future, you shall send up Wiggins alone to report, and the rest of you must wait in the street. Have you found it, Wiggins?
No, sir, we ain't.
I hardly expected you would. You must keep on until you do. Here are your wages. Now off you go and come back with a better report next time. There's more work to be got out of one of those little beggars than out of a dozen of the force. The mere sight of an official-looking person seals men's lips. These youngsters, however, go everywhere and hear everything. They are as sharp as needles, too. All they want is organization.
Is it on this Brixton case that you are employing them?
Yes, there is a point which I wish to ascertain. It is merely a matter of time. Hello, we are going to hear some news now with a vengeance. Here is Gregson coming down the road with beatitude written upon every feature of his face. Bound for us, I know. Yes, he is stopping. There he is.
My dear fellow, congratulate me. I have made the whole thing as clear as day.
Do you mean that you are on the right track?
The right track? Why, sir, we have the man under lock and key.
And his name is?
Arthur Charpentier, sub-lieutenant in Her Majesty's Navy.
Take a seat and try one of these cigars. We are anxious to know how you managed it. Will you have some whiskey and water?
I don't mind if I do. There's the strain upon the mind. You will appreciate that, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, for we are both brain workers.
You do me too much honor. Let us hear how you arrived at this most gratifying result.
The fun of it is that fool Lestrade, who thinks himself so smart, has gone off upon the wrong track altogether. He is after the secretary, Stangerson, who had no more to do with the crime than the babe unborn. I have no doubt that he has caught him by this time.
And how did you get your clue?
I'll tell you all about it. Of course, Dr. Watson, this is strictly between ourselves. You remember the hat beside the dead man?
Yes, by John Underwood and Sons, 129 Camberwell Road.
I had no idea that you noticed that. Have you been there?
No.
You should never neglect a chance, however small it may seem.
To a great mind, nothing is little.
Well, I went to Underwood and asked him if he had sold a hat of that size and description. He had sent the hat to a Mr. Drebber residing at Charpentier's boarding establishment, Torquay Terrace. Thus I got at his address.
Smart, very smart.
I next called upon Madame Charpentier. I found her very pale and distressed. Her daughter was in the room too, an uncommonly fine girl she is too. She was looking red about the eyes and her lips trembled as I spoke to her. That didn't escape my notice. I began to smell a rat. You know the feeling, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, when you come upon the right scent, a kind of thrill in your nerves.
In the midst of their discussion, Detective Gregson shared with Holmes a pivotal moment in his investigation, emphasizing a critical conversation he had during his visit to the home of the late Mr. Enoch J. Drebber's landlady.
At what o'clock did Mr. Drebber leave your house for the train?
At 8 o'clock. His secretary, Mr. Stangerson, said that there were 2 trains, one at 9:15 and one at 11. He was to catch the first.
And was that the last which you saw of him?
Yes.
No good can ever come of falsehood, Mother. Let us be frank with this gentleman. We did see Mr. Drebber again.
God forgive you. You have murdered your brother.
Arthur would rather that we spoke the truth.
You had best tell me all about it now. Half confidences are worse than none. Besides, you do not know how much we know of it.
On your head be it, Alice. I will tell you all, sir. Do not imagine that my agitation on behalf of my son arises from any fear lest he should have had a hand in this terrible affair. He is utterly innocent of it. My dread is, however, that in your eyes, and in the eyes of others, he may appear to be compromised. That, however, is surely impossible. His high character, his profession, his antecedents would all forbid it.
Your best way is to make a clean breast of the facts. Depend upon it, if your son is innocent, he will be none the worse.
Perhaps, Alice, you had better leave us together. Now, sir, I had no intention of telling you all this, but since my poor daughter has disclosed it, I have no alternative. Having once decided to speak, I will tell you all without omitting any particular.
It is your wisest course.
Mr. Drebber has been with us nearly 3 weeks. He and his secretary, Mr. Stangerson, had been travelling on the continent. I noticed a Copenhagen label upon each of their trunks, showing that that had been their last stopping place. Stangerson was a quiet, reserved man, but his employer, I am sorry to say, was far otherwise. He was coarse in his habits and brutish in his ways. The very night of his arrival, he became very much the worse for drink, and indeed, after 12 o'clock in the day, he could hardly ever be said to be sober. His manners towards the maidservants were disgustingly free and familiar. Worst of all, he speedily assumed the same attitude towards my daughter Alice, and spoke to her more than once in a way which, fortunately, she is too innocent to understand. On one occasion, he actually seized her in his arms and embraced her, an outrage which caused his own secretary to reproach him for his unmanly conduct.
But why did you stand all this? I suppose that you can get rid of your boarders when you wish.
Would to God that I had given him notice on the very day that he came. But it was a sore temptation. They were paying £1 a day each, £14 a week, and this is the slack season. I am a widow, and my boy in the Navy has cost me much. I grudged to lose the money. I acted for the best. This last was too much, however, and I gave him notice to leave on account of it. That was the reason of his going. My heart grew light when I saw him drive away. My son is on leave just now, but I did not tell him anything of all this, for his temper is violent, and he is passionately fond of his sister. When I closed the door behind them, a load seemed to be lifted from my mind. Alas, in less than an hour there was a ring at the bell, and I learned that Mr. Drebber had returned. He was much excited, and evidently the worse for drink. He forced his way into the room where I was sitting with my daughter and made some incoherent remark about having missed his train. He then turned to Alice and, before my very face, proposed to her that she should fly with him. "You are of age," he said, "and there is no law to stop you. I have money enough and to spare. Never mind the old girl here, but come along with me now straight away. You shall live like a princess." Poor Alice was so frightened that she shrunk away from him. But he caught her by the wrist and endeavoured to draw her towards the door. I screamed, and at that moment my son Arthur came into the room. What happened then I do not know. I heard oaths and the confused sounds of a scuffle. I was too terrified to raise my head. When I did look up, I saw Arthur standing in the doorway laughing with a stick in his hand. "I don't think that fine fellow will trouble us again," he said. "I will just go after him and see what he does with himself." With those words, he took his hat and started off down the street. The next morning we heard of Mr. Drebber's mysterious death.
And with that, Gregson recounted Mrs. Drebber's story, while Sherlock listened with a hint of disinterest.
It's quite exciting. What happened next?
Well, let me get back to it. When Mrs. Charpentier paused, I saw that the whole case hung upon one point. Fixing her with my eye in a way which I always found effective with women, I asked her at what hour her son returned.
"I do not know."
Not know?
"No, he has a latchkey and he let himself in."
After you went to bed?
"Yes."
So your son was gone at least 2 hours, possibly 4 or 5.
"Yes."
What was he doing during that time?
"I do not know."
Of course, after that, there was nothing more to be done. I found out where Lieutenant Charpentier was, took 2 officers with me and arrested him.
What is your theory, then?
Well, my theory is that he followed Drebber as far as the Brixton Road, when there a fresh altercation arose between them, in the course of which Drebber received a blow from the stick, in the pit of the stomach perhaps, which killed him without leaving any mark. The night was so wet that no one was about, so Charpentier dragged the body of his victim into the empty house. As to the candle and the blood and the writing on the wall and the ring, they may all be so many tricks to throw the police onto the wrong scent.
Well done. Really, Gregson, you are getting along. We shall make something of you yet.
I flatter myself that I have managed it rather neatly. The young man volunteered a statement in which he said that after following Drebber some time, the latter perceived him and took a cab in order to get away from him. On his way home, he met an old shipmate and took a long walk with him. On being asked where this old shipmate lived, he was unable to give any satisfactory reply. I think the whole case fits together uncommonly well. What amuses me is to think of Lestrade, who had started off upon the wrong scent. I'm afraid he won't make much of... Why, by Jove, here's the very man himself.
This is a most extraordinary case, a most incomprehensible affair.
Ah, you find it so, Mr. Lestrade. I thought you would come to that conclusion. Have you managed to find the secretary, Mr. Joseph Stangerson?
The secretary, Mr. Joseph Stangerson, was murdered at Halliday's private hotel about 6 o'clock this morning.